Welcome to our Cofunction Identities Part 2 video. Let's take a look at our first example. Use the cofunction identities to evaluate the expression below. If secant of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to 1.35, find cosecant of theta. When dealing with this type of problems, the first step is to identify what we want. Notice that we're interested in cosecant of theta, so let's go ahead and write that down. Our next step is to identify the relevant cofunction identity. In this case, since we're dealing with cosecant of theta, we need to find out which identity deals directly with cosecant of theta. So looking through this list of cofunctions identity, one finds out that this is the relevant cofunction identity. So let's go ahead and write that down. Cosecant of theta is equal to secant of pi over 2 minus theta. However, notice that we're given this particular value. We know that secant of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to 1.35. So let's go ahead and substitute that in. After we do the substitution, we're going to make use of the so-called transitive property of equality, which states the following. If A is equal to B and B is equal to C, you can conclude that A must be equal to C. And in this case, we can see that relationship holding true, because since cosecant of theta is equal to secant of pi over 2 minus theta, and secant of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to 1.35, we can conclude that cosecant of theta is equal to 1.35. So we're going to write that down as our conclusion. Therefore, cosecant of theta is equal to 1.35. So let's take a look at another example. Example 2. Use the cofunction identities to evaluate the expression below. If cosecant of pi over 2 minus theta is equal to negative 1.58, find the value for secant of theta. Once again, notice that what we want to find is secant of theta. So let's go ahead and write that down. Once we have written down what we want to identify which cofunction identity is relevant for this case. Looking at the list of 6 cofunction identities, we find out that the one that is relevant for our case is this one. So writing that down, we can say the following. Secant of theta is equal to cosecant of pi over 2 minus theta. But we know the value for cosecant of pi over 2 minus theta, which in this case happens to be negative 1.58. Therefore, using the transitive property of equality, we can conclude that secant of theta is equal to negative 1.58. So in summary, we can say that the 3 steps to figure out the values of interest here are the following. Step 1, to identify what you want to find. Step 2, to identify the relevant cofunction identity. And step 3, to substitute and use the properties of equality in order to figure out the value for what we want. And this concludes our video on Cofunction Identities Part 2. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.